The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I am so lucky. The host of the show is present and accounted for, Michael Duca. How are you?
Well, I'm accounted for. I'm not sure anyone would consider me to be a present.
Well, you're as present as, for me, as present as anyone gets in the entire world at this particular moment. So I don't know how much that means, but it means a lot to me, I'll tell you that. Thank you again for continuing our effort to make life interesting for not only Giant fans, but all baseball fans. And I like to say that at times we make it interesting for even the non-baseball fans. And for this, I thank you. And
well, I certainly hope we make it interesting for non-baseball fans. That's I'm not sure how many of them will tune in, but if they do, I hope we get them interested enough to stay. That is the goal.
Well, to stay and enjoy baseball, but enjoy our spirit of pursuing our passion. And sports, baseball in particular, has been a passion to you all your life. How did that get started? What's your first memory? Let's make it specific to baseball. Your first memory of baseball in your life as a kid.
You don't have to make it specific to baseball. It is my first memory. And
okay.
My first memory is the living room of our home, which was on the second floor at 943 Old Hawthorne Road in Lafayette. We had a black and white Philco TV. It was probably about a 17-inch TV in a cabinet that was, big enough to sail around the world. And what I remember is seeing on the evening news a flickery and grainy black and white image of what was being called the greatest catch in history. I was 3 years old.
1954.
I became a Giants fan all the way out here in California as a young child before kindergarten. And they were still in New York, and I had no idea how to be a fan, and I had no contact with them. And we didn't subscribe to a newspaper at the time, so there you go.
Well, let me tell you a Giant memory that I have as a little kid. In 1951, my grandfather took me to all three stadiums in New York. Polo Grounds, Yankee Stadium, and Ebbets Field. And he gave me a taste of all of them. And because of the expanse of grass in that said stadium, the Polo Grounds, where Willie made that catch, which wouldn't have been possible without that excess, of grass, I wouldn't have been a baseball fan. I wouldn't have been a Willie fan. But after the 51 season, my grandmother is walking me in the Bronx, and we go into Alexander's, and all I know is the black and orange that was filled up the summer for me. He was semi-retired, basically retired, took me to every weekend game in the Polo Grounds in 51. And I fell in love with that black and orange combination. And the season's over. It's about Halloween time. My grandmother walks me on the concourse, the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. She takes me into Alexander's, and there's crepe paper, black and orange crepe paper all over of Halloween. I thought it was the Giants again. The season had ended. I'm in mourning because the season had ended. They tried to explain winter was coming, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I see the black and orange, and I'm going, wow, the Giants. So I'm like 4 years old at the time. You're 4 years old at the time of your experience with seeing Willie's catch on the black and white TV. So that's how important. If anybody's listening, you put two and two together. That's how important baseball is to us, and that's why it's fun for me, because I find someone whose passion is much like mine, and it's fun along those lines, Michael.
Well, science tells us, Ralph, that you only have to walk around in front of a baby duck for about 10 minutes to imprint on it, and it thinks you're its mother. And so there's this fundamental instinct that is hardwired into us. And I think that, whatever it is that first grabs your attention as a kid, whatever it is that first gives you that dopamine rush, that kick of adrenaline, winds up staying with you for your whole life. It's why I cannot understand how, if you work for the North Face and and your job is going to move from Alameda to Denver, and you go, how can you become a Rockies fan? It doesn't compute with me. You might become a general baseball fan. You might not have a team to root for, but I don't know how you can switch your allegiance from one team to another. It couldn't be done. I lived in Southern California for almost all of my formative years, and I never once rooted for the Dodgers, not even when they were in the World Series and representing my league.
Well, I feel the same way about the Mets, who replaced my Giants, and I was loyal to them, even though 3 years after they were born, I moved out to California and spent the rest of my adult life living in not 20 minutes away from the Giants. And I still am a Giants apologist, but I'm a Met fan because the Mets didn't move when I was 11 years old. So I was affected by that, which adds to the drama. And but there is no team more endearing to me than the 51 Giants in my memory. I mean, I know every player, every number, every memory that I have watching Mueller in right field and Monty in left and Lockman, all those guys. You never lose that. But that was the New York Giants, and this is the San Francisco Giants. So there's a clusterfuck of stuff going on in my head around the two teams. So, but I know what you mean.
Oh, I hear you. I remember in 2001 when we had the 50th anniversary of the 1951 Miracle Giants. And the Giants as an organization, and I said this last Saturday during the Barry Bonds celebration, no team in all of professional sports, and the Yankees come close, but no team in all professional sports remembers and honors their history and tradition like the Giants do. They don't pay lip service to it. They don't just put up a little display in the outfield once in a while or have a monument here or there. They bring everybody back, and they let them stand there in their frailty in their 60s and 70s and 80s and talk to people and remind them of what the link to the past is that they're looking at. And in 1951, they brought back all the living guys. And they had a reception at the restaurant that was 24 at the time, which became the Acme Chop House later on and is now the Public House. And it was really special. I mean, it was just beyond special to be able to meet Monty Urban, to be able to meet
I was going to say Monty.
Thompson,
Yeah.
to be able
nothing
to
else,
to
getting the opportunity to meet Monty, that pretty much the icing on anybody's cake who ever loved baseball. Monty was absolutely, he was our Stan Musial, and he left his game in the Negro Leagues. He came to the majors.
Well, but for World War II, he would have been Jackie Robinson.
Yes, and as far as I know, I heard this from Peter Golenbach, that he was offered by Branch Rickey the monumental task of breaking the color line, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't take it up and he told Rickey that I'm just not ready. I couldn't turn the other cheek. I saw too much, and it became Jackie.
And gosh, there were so many other things. Alvin Dark was there. Johnny Antonelli was there. Just an amazing list of people. I'm
the sad part is
blanking
the only person alive from that team now is Willie, the only survivor from the 51 Giants.
And here's my question for you, Ralph, as a lifelong baseball fan. What did you think? What was going through your mind when Willie, who's been an anchor of the Hall of Fame for what now, almost 35 years, basically said to another Bay Area baseball icon, Joe Morgan, stop it, let Barry in the Hall?
Mm-hmm. Well,
what were you thinking?
My thinking was influenced by Barry Bloom about 5 or 6 years ago, and he made me realize that Barry was playing against competition that was equally as guilty in many cases, and as you pointed out, mainly the relief pitchers, of using any substance, enhancing their body, whatever. The game found a way of finding that equal playing board. He wasn't the only one. Clemens wasn't the only one. So my thinking was influenced by Barry Bloom. Had I not gotten his input and Golenbach's input and all that about it, I would have been absolutely shocked. I put myself in the position of being so fortunate of having the input of logic into it. As a fan, all I thought was, Barry's cheating this, Barry's cheating that, and I really didn't give him the credit while I went through the experience of watching him, because I knew that it was enhanced, but he was in such a groove. And baseball, the world has to realize that there won't be a Hall of Fame if you don't put guys like Clemens and Bonds. Who's going to come to see? Who's going to come to the Hall of Fame inductions? The kids of today, how are they going to respond to going up to the Hall of Fame and making it a part of their lives if the players they rooted for can't be included? So I was prepared for it. I wasn't shocked. Willie has always been loyal to Bobby and Barry. So there's something that I knew what he was thinking along those lines. He just never came out with it, and I'm glad he did. Sorry for my rambling.
No, it's fine. I think that the subject matter draws a great deal of heat, but sheds very little light. And I think it's good for people to talk out their feelings about this, because people who, I'm going to go off on a little tangent of my own here. People who talk about, wanting a level playing field and we should just exclude everybody from the steroid era, have their heads someplace where there's very little heat or light. It's never been a level playing field, and I mean never. Before 1946, the best players in the game weren't allowed to play, and 1946 was after World War II, and amphetamines were synthesized during the war by the Army to keep pilots awake. Now we know that it's a really bad idea, and if you take amphetamines and get in a cockpit within 24 hours, you'll lose your pilot's license, but that's the truth.
Yeah, they'll keep you awake, but the crash is monumental. In other words, the fall.
Well, especially if you're flying, the crash is monumental.
Twofold.
But my point is, there has never been a clean era of just guys playing the game, and the best 300, 400, 600, however big the leagues are, out there playing the game with whatever natural talents they had. We had a whole chapter in our book on the unwritten rules called "If You Ain't Cheating, You Ain't Trying." And it's been so since ever. Slippery elm tablets, spitballs, cork bats, buzzers on the field to signal people when signs have been stolen. There's no end to it. Yes, it's different. I'm sorry?
Hal Evars.
Sal Evars, who made some very bold assertions, and I don't want to call anybody true or untrue. I just simply want to point out a random fact, which is that Evars said that they were spying on signs in the Polo Grounds, and my question is then, how come they played 50% better baseball on the road than they did at home during that same stretch?
Well, very good point. I was blown away by that book, and as a Giant fan, I had to read it twice before it really took effect. Some players wanted to know what was coming. Some didn't, allegedly.
Most don't. Most only want location.
They don't want to know what's a fastball, what's a curveball.
They don't, because number one, they are acutely aware that if they are told that it's a fastball and it changes at the last moment, or somebody else misses a sign and it gets mixed up, if they're looking for a fastball and get a curve, they'll only look silly. But if they're looking for a curveball and leaning out over the plate and they get a fastball up and in, it can be fatal. And this is, I think yesterday is the 98th anniversary of Ray Chapman, so that's not an exaggeration. It can be fatal.
Yeah. We see now that coaches are wearing helmets, that helmets are being revised where they have these ear flaps that come down to your jaw and around your jaw. They're taking it seriously. What they have no way of taking seriously is the foul tip that goes back and hits the catcher and or the umpire. Now, I watch a lot of baseball on TV, and there isn't a game that goes by that an umpire doesn't get rung, have his bell rung. Do you notice there's a lot of that going on?
I not only noticed it, I have to disagree with you about the fact that there's nothing we can do about it. There is something we can do about it. I want you to think back, Ralph. Think back to when you were a kid. Close your eyes and try and conjure up a photograph, let's say a photograph of Yogi catching in Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
What's different about that than what you see today?
Well, you see his hat on backwards, his regular cap on backwards, and you see a rudimentary mask that isn't like a hockey mask that you see Posey wearing, for instance.
Where is he?
In relation to in other words, back him up. They could be backing him up. Is he in the same position?
They were further back. They were literally out of the catcher's box. And you had umpires like Tim McClelland in the day who would stand almost on the grass. They were literally at the back of the circle.
Oh.
Now, people are going to tell you, well, they cheat forward, so, because runners are so quick now, they have to have every advantage they can get on making that throw to second base. And, I know things are measured in hundredths of a second now, but that extra foot ain't going to make that much difference there. It really isn't. And if it does, oh well, pitch around it. Keep people in the game. If you were to move the catcher back even 8 to 10 inches, it's simple physics. You've got guys, you had Steve Dalkowski back in the day who could throw 103 miles an hour, but it was nowhere near home plate, or Ryan Duran, who was 100 miles an hour and would always throw a couple off the backstop in warm-ups just to keep people loose. But for the most part now, every bullpen's got a guy who can throw 98, 99, 100 miles an hour.
And
every
they all throw
night you're going to face a guy.
And they all throw in the 90s for sure.
Yeah, every night you're going to face at least one guy who can touch 97. And what does that mean?
So the ball's coming in faster. It's going to go back faster. Just
exactly.
The exit speed is increased. The athletes are better. They're getting more torque into the ball. So when it comes back...
And let me give you a couple of more pieces of data here. Guys are learning to throw harder. But we both know this. The ball moves more when you don't throw it hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's a rare pitcher who can throw a 95-mile-an-hour slider.
On a straight level.
It is, and if it comes in on a straight line, you're going to get a piece of it more often. This is one reason games are very long, is that there are more foul balls than there used to be.
If you get a piece of it, it's apt to come straight back. If you
straight back,
he's right on it. He just missed that one, which means it's coming straight back. And
it doesn't come straight back, of course, because it would have to go through the middle of the bat to go straight back. So it has to come back at an upward angle. And if you think about that,
okay, you're right.
If you're 6 inches or 8 inches further away, that upward angle will carry the ball to your forehead or above you instead of between your eyes. Now, the objection to it is, well, but if I'm not right up on top of home plate, I don't get calls on breaking pitches because the umpires give up on them, or I catch a ball in the dirt that might have been a strike. Well, we got enough technology now. Throw those umpires in a virtual reality headset room for 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours until they learn to call breaking pitches correctly from a further distance. It's just a matter of muscle memory. It's just a matter of being able to see it. Remember when you learned to drive and 40 miles an hour seemed fast, and then after you learned to drive for a year, 70 seemed slow?
And then you become
Same
70,
thing.
and 40 becomes fast. So
Yeah.
I've gone the full
right.
gamut on that one.
Right, and that's why we don't let 70-year-olds hit fastballs. But
right, they should.
It's the same thing. It's a learnable skill. It's a learnable skill, and I am utterly mystified why it's not tried, at least in low A ball, or someplace like that, a developmental league where you move the guys back 8-10 inches. Maybe you make the catcher's box an extra foot deeper. There's nothing sacrosanct about the size of it.
And the protection for an umpire isn't there isn't like protection for a catcher. You see these masks and stuff; they're more rudimentary.
Well, I think the protection is there. I mean, the masks are now hinged. They're heavily padded. They're wearing chest protectors. They've got roughly the same. They have steel-toed shoes even that the catchers don't have. But what's not there is a knowledge of what pitch is coming and how it's expected to break. The catcher knows what he called. The catcher knows what the guy can throw. The umpire's in town for 3 days and may or may not see the guy, and then he's not in town again for 4 weeks, and when he comes back, he may not have seen the guy that he's got the first night behind the plate. So, if you think about how many umpires there are and how pitching rotations work, it is rare for an umpire to see a starter more than 3 times in a year. It's rare for them to see a starter more than twice in a year.
Now, I wonder if that's good or bad in the overall calling of the game.
I don't know. You get some young umpires. We saw one last night in Los Angeles, Stu Sherwater. I guess you can take the theory that if you're pissing off both teams, you must be doing something right, or you can take the theory that if you're pissing off both teams, you might be doing something wrong. I don't know, but I do know that I saw pitches that weren't called in the 6th, 7th, and 8th innings that suddenly were getting called in the 10th, 11th, and 12th innings. And I know that's the one thing that players really, really complain about when they talk about umpires. They don't care if your zone, they don't care if your zone's 4 inches wide and runs from the top of your shoes to the middle of your shins. That's fine as long as it's still there in the 9th inning. They'll adjust to whatever you're calling, but don't change it.
Right.
There are umpires who are notorious for having a zone that's shaped like a rectangle in the 1st through 5th innings, and then in the 8th and 9th innings it's shaped like a trapezoid. Suddenly it gets 24 inches wide at the bottom of the zone.
Plane, or they're tired, or they want the game to end. Do you see any of that where it's just obvious?
It is possible that there's fatigue going on. There are things that you have to be aware of and think about. Stu Sherwater is one of the tallest umpires in the game. And you have to be aware that if he's that tall, he's probably going to compensate for that by not giving high strikes because it's going to look like he's calling them because he's taller. But he can't see the lower strikes as well as a shorter umpire can. And that was the part that was getting me last night, was watching how many pitches were in the zone at the very bottom of the zone over the plate and not getting called, And it's because, I think he's 6'5". And if you looked, when he got down in a squat, his head was about even with the batter's head. Normally, if you see an umpire, when they get down in a squat, they can almost look under the hitter's arm.
If you heard the announcers, I guess it must have been John Miller last night, because it was on the radio. And the announcers, or Miller says, "That is a ball. Ball? How could you call that a ball? It's something like that right down the middle of the plate. Where is the ball?" And when the announcer is genuinely surprised at the umpire's call, because they've got, in essence, what I think, best seat in the house. Am I right, you guys?
It varies. They have a crummy seat in Anaheim. They have, I'm not sure where they are in Citi Field because I haven't been there, but in Shea Stadium they used to be way down the right field line. It varies. The visiting announcers are sometimes calling the game literally off a TV monitor in front of them because their angle is so bad that it's almost impossible for them to do things like judge fly balls accurately.
Whoa. Didn't realize that. But do you hear anything about the electronic umpire coming? Did you hear that?
Well, I know Ben Zobrist paid the ultimate price for suggesting it.
All right.
He got ejected from a game for the first time in his career this week after a pitch that was called a strike. He turned around and said, "And that's why the union wants the electronic umpires."
Oh, he said that in the interview after the game as well.
No. He said it to the umpire.
Oh, I thought I heard him joke about it in a clip after the game.
He may have joked about it, but that's why he was ejected.
Oh.
And, he and I share that. And it wasn't the electronic umpire. It was just the one and only time I ever got thrown out of a game. Many years ago. Umpire was just having a bad day, and he called a strike on a pitch at my collarbone. And I started chuckling, and I turned around and I said, you're going to have a much better day if you just try looking between the bars.
And that was adios.
That was it. But, I earned it, and I reveled in it because he earned it.
Meat. Hey, speaking of grab some pine meat, the man whose voice is so ingrained in my head saying that, and who I have enjoyed since 1987, one way or the other, and that's Mike Krukow. He's been struggling. How is he doing? I'll ask you that periodically.
He's doing okay. There are certain things that are just too difficult for him. One thing that a lot of people do not realize is, yes, teams fly charter, you get your own row, you get fed tremendously well, you have lots of space on the aircraft, but when that charter flight lands, there's no jetway because you're not landing at a regular gate. Charter flights take off from special parts of the airport, and they land at special parts of the airport. And you get off the airplane on air stairs. And stairs are the one thing that give Mike the most trepidation, the most fear of falling, because it's very difficult to go downstairs when you have questionable balance and questionable leg strength when you're using a walking staff to maintain your balance. And the stairs just aren't really wide enough for Dwayne to go next to him and basically spot him all the way down. And, I mean, Dwayne's the world's best friend, but he's also Mike's age. And there comes a time when you have to acknowledge that, maybe your 68-year-old friend isn't the best person to keep the 68-year-old you from falling downstairs. So, Mike just came to a conclusion. He can no longer go to Wrigley Field because there are very steep steps going in and out of the press box there. It is a chore for him to broadcast at Oakland because there are 4 steps that go down to the floor level of the broadcast booth in Oakland, and I've seen them. I use them almost every day, and it's hard for him. The stairs are narrow, and there's a wall on one side which doesn't give you much opportunity to brace yourself. It's difficult for him to even get down those stairs, let alone coming down the air stairs. So a lot of the East Coast travel he just doesn't do. If you're 4, 5, 6 hours in an aircraft, changing your equilibrium and not being able to move around all that much, and then you have to stand up, unfold 6'3" of yourself. He's a big guy, and he was a big guy, and I played against him in high school. He was a big guy as a catcher in high school, and you try to come down those air stairs. It's difficult. So that's really what's getting to him, and that's why he doesn't do the Eastern travel anymore.
Okay. Well, would you, he doesn't know me from Adam, but when you brush up against him someday, would you tell him that he's got someone who's rooting for him? That's all.
He's got a whole lot of people who are rooting for him, but I'm sure, knowing Mike as well as I do, for as long as I've known him, it will only warm his heart to know that there's one more on the team.
All right. That's good. I can't go on today. We've talked enough, my friend. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Always happy to do it.
All right, Michael. Sorry, going to have to cut this one short a little bit. Be well and keep them flying. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Adios.